On Saturday morning, August 1st, the weather forecast for Spokane, Washington called for temperatures in the high 90s, humidity in the single digits, and wind gusts that would reach 35 to 45 miles per hour by afternoon. Every wildland firefighter and fire behavior analyst within range of that forecast knew what those numbers meant. You do not need a sophisticated fire behavior model to understand what happens when critically dry vegetation, grass and timber that has been baking through a summer heat wave with virtually no precipitation, is subjected to 40-mile-per-hour winds and single-digit humidity. You need a spark. The spark came at approximately midday Saturday at the intersection of North Old Trails Road and West Euclid Road in northwest Spokane. A witness named Paul Child saw a man kneeling near some grass at the roadside. The man looked nervous. Child kept walking. When he returned through the area and saw smoke rising, he called the Spokane County Sheriff's Office. What happened next happened fast, extremely fast. Faster than the 65,000 people who would receive mandatory evacuation orders in the following hours could fully process. The Old Trails fire. The fire that prosecutors are now charging a 37-year-old Spokane man named Aaron Farinacci with intentionally setting raced northeast from its ignition point in conditions that fire behavior science describes with a specific technical vocabulary: extreme rate of spread, maximum spotting distance, threshold conditions for structure ignition. In plain language, the fire ran. It ran through dry grass and timber at the urban fringe. It ran into established residential neighborhoods. It burned homes that had been built there with no particular thought given to wildfire risk, because until recently, wildfires burning into the urban core of Spokane was not something that needed to be thought about. That assumption, that the urban core of Washington's second largest city was protected from wildfire by virtue of being a city, was catastrophically wrong on Saturday. And understanding why it was wrong is the subject of this video. Let me explain what the atmospheric and fuel conditions looked like on August 1st in Spokane, because the fire behavior the Old Trails fire displayed was not an accident or a surprise to anyone who looked at the numbers. It was the predictable consequence of specific, well-understood conditions intersecting with an ignition source. Fuel moisture content is the single most important variable in fire behavior. It determines how easily fuels ignite, how fast they burn, and how much energy they release when they do. Green, living vegetation can have fuel moisture, contents of 80 to 200%. At those levels, fire spreads slowly, produces limited heat, and can often be stopped by fire lines of moderate width. As vegetation dries, fuel moisture falls. At 30%, fire behavior becomes active. At 15%, fire behavior becomes aggressive. At 8 to 10%, fire behavior enters the extreme category. Below 8%, fire behavior is what analysts describe as critical. Eastern Washington had been in a prolonged drought through the summer of 2026. The July heat wave that drove temperatures well above average across the western United States further desiccated vegetation that had already been drying since spring. Fox Weather's reporting on the Spokane fires confirmed that the conditions driving the rapid spread were high winds, very dry vegetation, and rugged terrain. The specific humidity numbers on Saturday, single digits, indicate that the fine fuel moisture content in Spokane's grasses and brush on August 1st was in the critical range. Now, add wind. Fire spread rate scales with wind speed in a nonlinear relationship. Doubling wind speed does not double fire spread rate. It multiplies it by significantly more than 2, because wind provides both the oxygen that sustains combustion and the forward pressure that tilts flames toward unburned fuels ahead of the fire front, preheating them and reducing the time to ignition. At 35 to 45 miles per hour, fire in critical fuel conditions does not spread. It runs. Spotting, the process by which burning embers are lofted ahead of the fire front and start new ignitions, can carry embers a quarter mile, half a mile, or more in high winds. Each spot fire becomes a new ignition point. Each new ignition point becomes a new front. The fire's effective spread is no longer governed by the rate at which the flame front advances through continuous fuels. It is governed by how far the wind can carry embers and how quickly new ignitions can establish. This is why Level 3, go now. Evacuation orders in a running fire like the Old Trails fire carry a very different time urgency than Level 3 orders in a slowly creeping fire. The spot fire mechanism means that a house that is 3 blocks from the visible fire front may have burning embers landing on its roof, while the main fire front is still a quarter mile away. The ember to ignition time for dry wooden shingles, dry decking, dry vegetation, adjacent to the structure can be measured in minutes. The window between the fire is visible at the end of the block and your house is on fire in these conditions is not long enough to drive somewhere, pack boxes, and decide what to take. That is why the Level 3 orders issued on Saturday said, go now, not because of bureaucratic caution, because the physics of fire behavior at critical fuel moisture and 40-plus mile-per-hour winds demands it. I want to talk specifically about the wildland-urban interface problem in Spokane, because it is the structural vulnerability that the August 1st fires exposed, and it is a vulnerability that is not unique to Spokane. The wildland-urban interface, what fire scientists call the WUI, is the zone where developed human-occupied land meets or intermingles with wildland vegetation. WUI areas can take different forms. In some areas, homes are built directly adjacent to forest or rangeland, with wildland fuels on one side and residential development on the other. In intermixed WUI, residential development occurs within the wildland itself, with houses scattered through forest or rangeland. In both cases, the interface creates conditions where wildland fires can directly threaten structures. Spokane's northwest neighborhoods are WUI. Not dramatically, not the kind of WUI that looks like a mountain cabin surrounded by dense ponderosa pine. The more subtle kind, where residential development built in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s on land that was previously rangeland sits at the edge of patches of native bunchgrass and shrub that provide continuous fuel paths into established neighborhoods. In a year of average fire weather, that suburban WUI might not pose a significant threat to structures because the fuel moisture is high enough that fires can be suppressed before they bridge from wildland to residential. In a year of critical fuel moisture and 40-mile-per-hour winds, the connection from wildland fuel to residential structure becomes essentially instantaneous. Mayor Lisa Brown, speaking Monday, acknowledged the structural reality that underlies this specific disaster. We have known for years of the dangers of the changing climate and have been working to reduce the risk. But this is an unprecedented situation, and it's not over yet. That phrase, unprecedented situation, is carrying real meaning here. Not unprecedented in the sense that wildfires are new or that Spokane has never had bad fire years. Unprecedented in the sense that a wildfire burning through urban residential neighborhoods with this level of destruction has not happened in Spokane's modern history. The city has grown into its WUIs without fully accounting for what extreme fire conditions, which are becoming more frequent as the regional climate shifts, can do in those areas. The result is what Spokane is now documenting. Chimneys standing above ash piles where homes used to be, concrete foundations bare and exposed, lots that 3 days ago contained, houses that were someone's entire physical world, now reduced to the kind of landscape that takes years to fully clear and rebuild. Let me walk through the specific fire behavior of the Spokane complex in the days since Saturday, because the pattern illustrates something important about how fires behave in these conditions. The Old Trails fire ignited at approximately midday Saturday near West Euclid Road. In high wind, critical fuel moisture conditions, the fire experienced what fire behavior analysts call explosive growth. The Autumn Lane and Fairview fires also ignited Saturday. Their causes still under investigation, their ignition points separate from Old Trails and from each other. By Saturday evening, the three fires together had already destroyed hundreds of structures. Through Sunday, fire crews established preliminary lines, but the fires continued to spread in the rugged terrain on Spokane's western and northwestern flank. The fires are burning in terrain that combines residential development with Riverside State Park, a 14,000-acre park along the Spokane River that contains significant wildland vegetation and whose boundary is deeply intermixed with residential development. The terrain in that area, with its river corridor, its basalt outcrops, and its draws that channel and accelerate wind, created exactly the conditions where fire behavior is most complex and most difficult to suppress. On Sunday, the fires had spread across approximately 2 square miles, roughly 21 square kilometers. By Monday morning, they had grown to 5 square miles, still at 0% containment. That growth from Sunday to Monday, in a period when crews were actively fighting the fires, reflects what happens when overnight conditions remain adverse. Nighttime relative humidity recovery was insufficient to suppress active burning. The fires ran overnight. The Sunday night surge was not primarily wind-driven in the way Saturday's initial spread was. It reflected the combination of ongoing fuel availability, residual heat in already burned areas, and the difficulty of establishing defensible perimeters in complex terrain in the dark. Crews could establish line in one area and have the fire find a route around or through their work in another area before they could respond. The morning of Monday, August 4th, brought the first forecast that gave fire managers genuine reason for cautious optimism: cooler temperatures and lower wind speeds. Reduced wind speed in critical fuel conditions does not stop a fire, but it dramatically reduces the rate of spread, reduces spotting distance, and, most importantly for the firefighters, makes their work on the fire's perimeter safer and more productive. The gap between the line crew working on the ground and the nearest point of active fire increases. The probability of the fire running around an established line decreases. Whether that opportunity was realized on Monday depended on the actual wind behavior, which in complex terrain always has the potential to diverge from the regional forecast. Mayor Brown's Monday statement, I'm sorry to report that the winds have shifted and the fires are not contained up to this point, suggests that the forecast opportunity was not fully translated into containment progress, at least through Monday. The arson element of this disaster is both a criminal story and a fire behavior story, and I want to address both dimensions. The criminal story is straightforward. Aaron Farinacci, 37, was arrested Monday on a charge of first-degree arson in connection with the Old Trails fire. He appeared in court Tuesday via video link. His bond is $1 million. His prior criminal history includes a 2010 manslaughter conviction in Arizona. The investigation into the fires continues, and Farinacci has been charged only in connection with the Old Trails fire. The causes of the Autumn Lane and Fairview fires remain under investigation. The fire behavior story is about what arson means in conditions like Saturdays, when fuel moisture is critical and winds are at 40+ miles per hour. The threshold between spark and catastrophic fire approaches zero. In ordinary fire weather conditions, adequate fuel moisture, calm winds, a match dropped in a grassy area might start a small fire that self-extinguishes, or that burns a few acres before crews can respond and contain it. In the conditions that existed in northwest Spokane on August 1st, a match dropped in dry grass in a WI area at midday was, from a fire behavior perspective, approximately equivalent to touching a match to gasoline. This does not diminish the moral and legal responsibility that the arson charge reflects. What Aaron Farinacci is accused of doing, intentionally igniting a fire in those conditions, in that location, reflects either a deliberate intention to cause catastrophic destruction or an extraordinary disregard for the consequences. The law distinguishes between these in determining charges and sentencing, and that determination will proceed through the courts. But from a fire management perspective, the Spokane disaster illustrates something that fire scientists and emergency managers have been saying with increasing urgency. In extreme fire weather conditions, ignition control becomes impossible through any practical means. There are no credible measures that would have prevented a single spark, in the right location in those conditions, from becoming a catastrophic fire. The only effective mitigation is to reduce the fuel load, reduce the ignition sources, or, since you cannot control the weather, invest in the kind of defensible space, structure hardening, and early detection systems that give communities the best possible chance of catching a fire before it becomes a disaster. I want to put the Spokane complex in the context of the western United States wildfire situation this summer, because the resource constraint is one of the most important dimensions of what is happening, and it is not getting adequate attention. Washington State has had more than 1,000 fires burn approximately 425,000 acres in 2026. As of this week, approximately 200,000 acres are actively burning in 12 large fires. Governor Ferguson's burn ban through September 30th reflects the expectation that the conditions enabling this level of fire activity will persist for 2 more months. The Spokane complex is the most destructive and most urban of those fires, but it is competing for resources with significant fire activity across the state and across the western United States. California, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Colorado are all managing significant fire complexes simultaneously. The California Complex Incident Management Team 7, deployed to Spokane, is a national resource, one of the country's most experienced large fire management teams, and its deployment to Spokane reflects the priority the federal government has assigned to the urban fire situation there. But it also means that Team 7 is not available for other fires that may need it. The resource strain in the western United States right now is documented and real. Multiple reporting outlets noted that the Spokane fires stretched the ability of federal, state, and local agencies to fight them. This language, from official fire management sources, reflects the operational reality that national firefighting capacity, while substantial, has limits, and those limits are being tested by a summer of simultaneous large fire activity across a wide geographic area. The National Guard mobilization in Washington, troops deployed for evacuation support, traffic control, and firefighting assistance, reflects Governor Ferguson's recognition that state civilian resources alone were insufficient. The mutual aid system that brings Type 1 incident management teams, hotshot crews, air tankers, and helicopters from across the country to support state fire agencies is working as designed. But working as designed in a resource-constrained environment means prioritization, which means some fires get fewer resources than they might in a less active fire season. Spokane, with its 230,000 person population, its economic significance, and its urban fire, is getting priority. But it is getting priority within a system that is at or near capacity. Let me close with what the Spokane fires tell us about the current and future state of urban wildfire risk in the western United States. The conventional mental model of wildfire in American culture is rural. A fire burning in the mountains, in forests, in rangeland, threatening cabins and small towns. The people who lose their homes are people who chose to live in the woods, who accepted an elevated risk as part of the lifestyle that living in a forested setting provides. The fire does not come to the city. The city is, by definition, not wildland. That mental model has been failing for years, and Spokane has now shattered it in a way that is difficult to argue with. A city of 230,000 people, the second largest city in the state of Washington, lost hundreds of homes, a sports complex, and 65,000 residents to evacuation orders in a single day. The fire did not burn to the edge of the city and stop. It burned into it. The mechanism is the one I described earlier, the wildland-urban interface that exists not just at the dramatic edges of mountain towns, but at the suburban fringes of medium and large cities throughout the western United States. Those fringes were built during decades when the fire weather that created August 1st's conditions was a rare event rather than a predictable seasonal extreme. They were built with materials, wood framing, asphalt shingles, wooden decks, landscaping that provides continuous fuel paths from wildland to structure, that reflect that era's assumptions about wildfire risk. As the climate shifts those assumptions, the architecture of risk shifts with it. Communities like Spokane that sit at the transition between developed land and the fire-adapted landscapes of eastern Washington need to reckon with the possibility, now confirmed as a reality, that fire weather events capable of driving flames through residential neighborhoods will occur. The question is not whether this will happen again. It is what Spokane and cities like it choose to do in the years between events to reduce the consequences when it does. Mayor Brown acknowledged this directly. We have known for years of the dangers of the changing climate and have been working to reduce the risk. But this is an unprecedented situation, and it's not over yet. The work of reducing the risk, defensible space programs, structure hardening ordinances, vegetation management in WUI areas, community warning and evacuation systems, is the unglamorous, years-long expensive work that happens between disasters. It is the work that determines whether the next extreme fire weather event produces 700 destroyed structures or 200, whether it produces 65,000 evacuees or 15,000, whether it produces the worst natural disaster a region has ever faced, or a serious but manageable event. That work is harder to cover than a fire. It produces fewer dramatic photographs. It moves on a budget cycle, not a news cycle, but it is the actual answer to what is happening in Spokane this week. The fires are not contained, the work continues. And the question of what Spokane and the cities like it choose to do next is one that will be answered in the years ahead. Subscribe and turn on notifications for fire science and emergency preparedness coverage as the Spokane situation continues to develop. Stay safe, know your zone. Have your go bag ready.